I met Richard Vance when I was 24 years old, fresh out of business school with nothing but debt, ambition, and a half-formed idea for a software company. He was 47, a legend in the industry, the kind of man who'd built and sold 3 companies before I'd learned to drive. He took me to lunch, listened to my pitch, and then did something I never expected. "I'll invest," he said. "Not just money, time, connections, advice. But I want something in return." I leaned forward, ready to agree to anything. "I want you to succeed," he continued. "And when you do, I want you to remember who helped you get there." I promised I would. I kept that promise for 12 years. It was the biggest mistake of my life. Let me rewind. My name is Alex Chin. I'm the founder of Nexus Solutions, a software company that started in my one-bedroom apartment and grew into a multimillion-dollar enterprise with offices in 3 cities. Richard Vance wasn't just my investor. He was my mentor, my advisor, my second father. He was there for every milestone. The first hire, the first office, the first million in revenue. He celebrated with me, counseled me, pushed me to be better. I trusted him completely. Over the years, Richard's role evolved. He joined my board. He introduced me to his network. He became the voice in my head when I faced tough decisions. What would Richard do? I'd ask myself, and then I'd do it. But Richard had his own company, 2 Vance Technologies, a legacy business he'd built decades ago. It was successful but stagnant, a cash cow that funded his lifestyle but hadn't grown in years. He'd step back from day-to-day operations, travel the world, give keynote speeches. I envied his freedom but never questioned his commitment to me. Then, 2 years ago, Richard came to me with a proposal. "Alex," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk, "I've been thinking about the future. My company, yours, we're stronger together. A merger would create a powerhouse. Combined resources, combined talent, combined market share. We could dominate the industry." I was stunned. A merger with Richard's company? It was the ultimate validation. The student becoming the partner. "I'd want you to be CEO of the combined entity," he continued. "I'll step back, take a board seat, advise. You're ready for this. You've earned it." We spent the next 6 months negotiating the deal. Lawyers, accountants, due diligence teams. Richard was generous, almost too generous. He valued my company fairly, gave me a significant stake in the new entity, and promised me operational control. I signed the papers on a Friday, feeling like I'd arrived. The merger closed on a Monday. I walked into our new headquarters, Richard's old building, rebranded, feeling like a king. On Tuesday, I was fired. Security escorted me out of the building at 9:17 a.m. My access cards didn't work. My email was locked. My phone calls went to voicemail. Richard, my mentor, my second father, had orchestrated a takeover disguised as a merger. And I'd signed away everything. The termination letter was handed to me by a security guard as I stood in the lobby, surrounded by my personal effects in a cardboard box. It was formal, cold, and devastating. "Dear Mr. Chin, effective immediately, your employment with Nexus Vance Technologies is terminated. As part of the merger agreement, the board has determined that your position is redundant. You will receive severance as outlined in your contract. All company property must be returned. Please direct any questions to legal. Sincerely, the Board of Directors." The Board of Directors. Richard's board. Filled with Richard's people. I'd been so focused on the deal, so trusting of my mentor, that I hadn't vetted the board composition. I hadn't insisted on protections. I'd signed a contract that gave Richard and his allies complete control. I stood on the sidewalk outside the building I'd helped build, clutching a box of my belongings, and felt the world collapse around me. 12 years. 12 years of work, of sacrifice, of believing in a man who'd been playing me from the start. I went home and did what any reasonable person would do. I called my lawyer. Her name is Priya Sharma, and she's the best corporate attorney in the city. She'd represented me during the merger negotiations, but Richard's team had outmaneuvered her at every turn. She'd warned me, repeatedly, that the deal was unbalanced.
ID ignored her. Trusting Richard over her expertise.
Now she listened to my story without saying, "I told you so." When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Alex, I need you to send me the entire merger agreement. Every page, every appendix, every email exchange. I'm going to review it line by line. There has to be something we can use." "There's nothing," I said bitterly. "I signed away everything. You signed a contract. Contracts have clauses. And sometimes, clauses work both ways." I sent her the files. She called me back 3 days later. "I found something." I sat up straighter. "What?" "There's a non-compete clause in the agreement. Standard stuff. It prevents you from starting a competing business or soliciting clients for 2 years. "I know. That's why I'm screwed. I can't even work in my own industry." "But here's the thing, Alex. The non-compete applies to both parties. Not just you. Richard signed it too." I frowned. "Richard doesn't need to compete with himself. He owns the merged company." "Exactly. He owns it. Which means he's not competing. But what if he leaves? What if he decides to start something new?" "Richard's not leaving. He's 70 years old. He's going to ride this merger into retirement." "Maybe. But contracts don't care about intentions. They care about words. And the words in this clause say that both parties agree not to engage in any business that competes with the merged entity for 2 years. If Richard ever tried to start another company, or even consult for a competitor, he'd be in breach." I was starting to see where this was going. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying that Richard has painted himself into a corner. He can't sell the merged company for 2 years without triggering a change of control clause. He can't start a new venture. He can't even advise a competitor. He's trapped. And you have time. Time to do what? Time to wait. Time to watch. Time to document every move he makes. And if he ever slips, if he ever even hints at violating that clause, you can sue him. You can tie him up in court for years. You can make his life a living hell." I sat back, the pieces falling into place. Richard thought he'd won. He thought he'd taken everything from me and left me with nothing. But he'd signed a contract. And contracts, as I was about to learn, are powerful things. "So what do I do now?" Priya's voice was steady. "First, you grieve. You rage. You let yourself feel everything you're feeling. Then, when you're ready, you start planning. Because this isn't over, Alex. It's just beginning." I spent the next week in a fog of anger and despair. I barely ate, barely slept, just sat in my apartment replaying every moment with Richard, searching for the signs I'd missed. They were everywhere. The way he'd praised me but never promoted me. The way he'd advised me but never empowered me. The way he'd positioned himself as my mentor while systematically building the leverage to destroy me. On the 8th day, I got an email. It was from a former client, someone I'd worked with for years. She'd heard about the merger, about my departure. And she had questions.
"Alex, I'm confused.
Richard's team reached out to renew our contract, but they're asking for terms we've never discussed. Higher prices, longer commitments. I don't feel comfortable. Is there someone else I should talk to?" I stared at the email, a cold clarity settling over me. Richard wasn't just taking my company. He was destroying my relationships. He was leveraging my clients, raising prices, alienating the people I'd spent years cultivating. He was burning my legacy to the ground. And then I remembered Priya's words. If he ever even hints at violating that clause, I called her back. Richard's contacting my clients, trying to renegotiate their contracts. Is that a violation? Priya was quiet for a moment. It depends. If he's just doing business as usual, no. But if he's using your departure as leverage to change terms, to extract more value, that could be seen as bad faith. And if he's doing it to personally benefit, that's interesting. How so? The non-compete applies to him personally. If he's using his position to extract personal benefit, say by renegotiating contracts in a way that enriches him individually, not just the company, that could be a breach. We'd need proof, though. Documentation. Emails, memos, anything that shows his intent. I started documenting. Every client email, every conversation, every piece of evidence that Richard was running the company in a way that served him, not the business. I built a file, then a folder, then a database. I became a ghost in the machine, watching my former mentor from the shadows. And then, 6 months later, I found what I was looking for. A former colleague, still inside the company, reached out anonymously. He'd heard rumors that Richard was planning something big, a new venture, separate from the merged company, using the same technology and relationships he'd acquired through the merger. It was exactly the kind of move the non-compete was designed to prevent. I called Priya. We need to move. Richard's planning to start something new. And if he does, he's in breach. Can you prove it? Not yet, but I have someone inside. Someone who's willing to talk. Be careful, Alex. If Richard finds out you're investigating him, he'll destroy you. He already tried. Now it's my turn. So what happens next? Subscribe. My inside source was a man named Derek. He'd been Richard's right hand for 15 years. Loyal, trusted, invisible. I'd never liked him, but I'd never had reason to distrust him either. When he reached out anonymously using a burner email and a fake name, I was skeptical. But the information he provided was too detailed, too specific to be fake. Meeting minutes, draft business plans, email chains, all pointing to Richard's secret project. A new company using the exact same technology we developed together, targeting the exact same clients. The non-compete violation was textbook. Derek and I met in person for the first time 3 weeks after his initial contact. A coffee shop on the other side of town, neutral ground, far from anyone who might recognize us. He looked nervous, older than I remembered, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting Richard to materialize from the shadows. Why are you helping me? I asked, cutting through the small talk. He hesitated, then spoke. Because Richard is doing the same thing to me that he did to you, promising loyalty, demanding trust, and then stabbing you in the back. He's been grooming a replacement for years. Someone younger, cheaper, more desperate. My job is on the line. My pension, my reputation, everything. I figured if I helped you, maybe you'd remember me when this is over. It was a cold, pragmatic reason. I respected it more than I would have respected loyalty. Show me what you have. He slid a thick folder across the table. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Internal memos, financial projections, legal drafts. The picture they painted was damning. Richard had been planning his exit strategy for months, possibly years. The new company, codenamed Project Phoenix, was designed to rise from the ashes of our merged entity. He'd been quietly transferring intellectual property, client relationships, and key employees to shell companies, all in preparation for the moment when he'd launch his new venture. The merger, my firing, the whole thing, it was all part of a master plan to consolidate my company's assets, strip them for parts, and then abandon the shell while he rode off into the sunset with the valuables. The non-compete clause, the one I'd thought would trap him, was a joke. He'd structured everything so that the new company would be owned by a trust, managed by a front man, technically separate from him. On paper, Richard Vance wasn't starting a competing business. In reality, he was the puppet master pulling every string. Does he know you have this? I asked. Derek shook his head.
No.
But it's only a matter of time. He's paranoid. He'll notice if things go missing. How much time do we have? A week, maybe 2. He does inventory checks. Random, unpredictable. If he notices these documents are gone, he'll know someone leaked. And he'll know it was someone close. I looked at the folder, then at Derek. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Why come to me? Because you're the only one with standing to sue him. The only one who can use this evidence without being accused of theft or espionage. You were the victim. You have the moral high ground. I'm just the guy who handed you the gun. I took the folder. Thank you, Derek. I won't forget this. Just make sure he doesn't win. That's all I ask. I spent the next week in my apartment, going through every document, building a timeline, connecting dots. The picture that emerged was staggering. Richard had been planning this for 3 years, long before he approached me about the merger. The mentorship, the advice, the fatherly concern, it was all a performance. A long con designed to gain my trust, extract my value, and then discard me. The emotional weight of that realization was crushing. But beneath it, something else was growing. A cold, focused determination. He'd made a mistake. He'd assumed I'd be too broken, too beaten to fight back. He'd underestimated me. I called Priya. I have everything. Documents, timelines, proof of intent. He's planning to launch a new company that directly competes with the merged entity, using assets that rightfully belong to that entity. It's a clear violation of his fiduciary duty and the non-compete clause. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "This is huge, Alex, but we have to be strategic. If we go to court now, he'll argue that the documents were stolen, that they're inadmissible, that you're just a bitter ex-employee on a vendetta. We need to catch him in the act. We need him to actually launch the new company, to publicly announce it, to make the violation undeniable. So we wait. We watch. We document. We build a case so airtight that even Richard's army of lawyers can't poke holes in it. And then, at the perfect moment, we strike." Waiting was torture. Every day, I imagined Richard moving forward with his plans, getting closer to his goal, while I sat on my hands. But I trusted Priya. She'd never steered me wrong. The breakthrough came 3 months later. Derek, still my inside source, sent me a link to a website. It was bare bones, a landing page with a logo and a tagline. The company name, Phoenix Innovations. The tagline, "The future of enterprise software, reborn." And at the bottom, in tiny print, founder, Richard Vance. He'd done it. He'd launched. Publicly, brazenly, as if daring anyone to stop him. I called Priya. "He's live. The website is up. His name is on it." She was already pulling it up. "I see it. This is perfect. It's public, it's undeniable, and it's a direct violation of the non-compete. We file tomorrow." The next morning, we filed a lawsuit in federal court. The complaint was 147 pages long, with exhibits documenting every step of Richard's scheme. We asked for an injunction to shut down Phoenix Innovations, damages for breach of contract, and a declaration that Richard had forfeited his stake in the merged company. The legal world exploded. The story was picked up by every business publication. Mentor sued by protege in explosive non-compete battle. Richard's PR team scrambled, issuing denials, attacking my credibility, painting me as a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind. But the evidence was there, public and undeniable. A week later, Richard's lawyer called Priya. They wanted to talk. They wanted to settle. The settlement offer was generous on paper. Richard would pay me a substantial sum, drop his claims against me, and allow me to walk away with my reputation intact. In exchange, I'd drop the lawsuit and agree not to compete with Phoenix Innovations for an additional 2 years. Priya presented it to me without judgment. "It's a good offer. You'd be financially secure for life. You could start over, do anything you want, and you'd avoid years of litigation." I looked at the offer, then at her. "What do you think I should do?" She hesitated. "I think you need to decide what you really want. Money? Vindication? Revenge? The offer gives you money. The lawsuit might give you the rest. But it might also bankrupt you and leave you with nothing." I thought about Richard, about the years of trust, the betrayal, the cold calculation of his scheme, about Derek, who'd risked everything to help me, about the clients, the employees, the people who'd believed in me. "I want more than money," I said. "I want him to face what he did. I want the world to know the truth." Priya nodded slowly. "Then we fight." "So what happens in court? Does Richard's army of lawyers manage to spin the evidence? Or does the truth finally come out? Let me know your predictions in the comments. Subscribe. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. Reporters, industry analysts, curious onlookers, everyone wanted to see the mentor and protege face off. Richard sat at the defense table, immaculate in a tailored suit, surrounded by a team of lawyers who probably cost more per hour than I'd made in my first year of business. He looked calm, confident, utterly unbothered. I sat with Priya, my hands clammy, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when 12 years of trust, betrayal, and cold calculation would be laid bare for the world to see. The judge, a woman named Morrison with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings, called the court to order. Priya delivered the opening statement, laying out our case with surgical precision. Your Honor, this case is about betrayal. Not just personal betrayal, but systematic, calculated fraud. The defendant, Richard Vance, spent years cultivating the trust of my client, Alex Chun. He posed as a mentor, a father figure, a trusted advisor. But behind that mask, he was methodically planning to steal everything my client had built. She walked the jury through the timeline. The initial investment, the years of mentorship, the merger proposal, the termination, and finally, the secret launch of Phoenix Innovations using assets stolen from the merged company. The evidence will show that Mr. Vance didn't just break a contract. He broke the law. He breached his fiduciary duty. He committed fraud. And he did it all while smiling in my client's face and calling himself a friend. Richard's lawyer, a silver-haired man named Harrison, gave a masterful opening of his own. He painted Richard as a visionary, a man who'd built an empire and generously shared his wisdom with a young entrepreneur. The merger, he argued, was a legitimate business transaction. The termination was a routine corporate decision. And Phoenix Innovations? A separate venture, legally distinct, with no overlap in technology or clients. Mr. Chun is a bitter former employee who made poor business decisions and is now looking for someone to blame. The evidence will show that Mr. Vance acted in good faith at every step. There is no fraud. There is no conspiracy. There is only a man who took a risk, lost, and now wants to drag his former mentor down with him. The first witness was me. Priya guided me through my testimony calmly, methodically. I described the early days, the mentorship, the trust I'd placed in Richard. I described the merger negotiations, the promises he'd made, the assurances that I'd be CEO of the combined entity. I described the day I was fired, the security escort, the cardboard box of my belongings. When did you first suspect that something was wrong? Priya asked. Honestly, not until after I was fired. I trusted Richard completely. I thought he was my friend, my mentor. It never occurred to me that he was playing a long game. And when did you learn the truth? I described Derek's anonymous contact, the documents, the evidence of Richard's secret planning. I described the discovery of Phoenix Innovations, the public launch, the undeniable proof of breach. Harrison cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint me as bitter and unreliable. Mr. Chun, isn't it true that you were struggling financially before the merger?
No.
Isn't it true that you'd considered selling your company to other buyers before Richard approached you? I'd had conversations, yes, but nothing serious. And isn't it true that you signed the merger agreement voluntarily, after consulting with lawyers and advisors? Yes. So you're a sophisticated businessman who made a decision, and now you regret it? I regret trusting someone who was lying to me the entire time. The next witness was Derek. He walked to the stand looking pale and nervous. Richard's lawyers had tried to have his testimony excluded, arguing that he'd stolen documents and violated confidentiality. Judge Morrison ruled that the documents were admissible, but that Derek's credibility could be challenged. Under Priya's questioning, Derek described the inner workings of Richard's scheme. The secret meetings, the offshore accounts, the front companies, the meticulous planning that had started years before the merger. Did Mr. Vance ever discuss his intentions toward Mr. Chen? Priya asked. He referred to Alex as the golden goose, Derek said quietly. Said he was fattening him up for the kill. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Richard's face remained impassive, but I saw his jaw tighten. Harrison's cross-examination was brutal. He accused Derek of theft, of disloyalty, of fabricating evidence to save his own job. Derek held his ground, but I could see the toll it was taking. By the time he stepped down, he looked like a man who'd been through a war. The expert witnesses came next. Forensic accountants testified about the flow of money, the shell companies, the hidden assets. Intellectual property experts explained how Richard had systematically transferred technology from the merged company to his new venture. Each witness added another layer to the mountain of evidence. Then it was Richard's turn. He took the stand with the confidence of a man who'd testified 100 times. His voice was calm, measured, utterly convincing. He denied everything. The secret planning, routine business strategy, the offshore accounts, standard tax planning. The Phoenix Innovations launch, a retirement project completely separate from the merged company. I mentored Alex because I believed in him, Richard said, looking directly at the jury. I invested in him. I gave him every opportunity. And this is how he repays me, by dragging my name through the mud, by accusing me of crimes I didn't commit. It's heartbreaking. Priya's cross-examination was relentless. Mr. Vance, you signed a non-compete clause. Did you not? Yes. And that clause prohibits you from starting a competing business for 2 years? It prohibits me from starting a business that competes directly with the merged entity. Phoenix Innovations is not that. It uses the same technology, targets the same clients, and is led by the same people. How is that not competing? Technology evolves. Markets change. Phoenix Innovations is a new venture, serving new clients with new solutions. New solutions that are based on intellectual property developed at the merged company? Intellectual property that I helped create. I have rights too. Priya produced a document, an email from Richard to his lawyers, dated 6 months before the merger. In it, he outlined a plan to extract maximum value from the deal and then transition to new opportunities. Mr. Vance, you wrote this email, did you not? Richard's composure cracked, just slightly. Yes, but it's taken out of context. What context could possibly justify planning to extract value from a merger before it even happened? I was thinking about the future, about retirement. That's all. Priya pressed on, document after document, email after email. Each one chipped away at Richard's credibility. By the time she finished, the image of the benevolent mentor was in tatters. Closing arguments were scheduled for the next day. I went home that night drained but hopeful. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard's lies had been exposed. But juries are unpredictable, and Richard's lawyer was skilled at creating doubt. The next morning, we gathered in the courtroom for the final arguments. Priya spoke passionately about justice, about the importance of holding powerful people accountable. Harrison painted me as a bitter opportunist, twisting facts to fit a narrative. Then the jury retired to deliberate. The waiting was agony. Hours passed, then a day, then 2. I paced my apartment, unable to eat, unable to sleep, replaying every moment of the trial in my head. On the 3rd day, the jury reached a verdict. So what do you think they decided? Did they believe me, or did Richard's charm win them over? Let me know your predictions in the comments. The verdict and the moment when everything changes. Subscribe. The courtroom was silent as the jury filed back in. 12 faces, impossible to read. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Richard sat motionless beside his lawyers, his expression carefully neutral. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, handed a piece of paper to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Morrison. She read it silently, then looked up at the room. Will the defendant please rise? Richard stood, adjusting his tie, a man who'd faced countless verdicts and always walked away victorious. This time I knew would be different. Judge Morrison's voice was steady, formal. On the charge of breach of contract, how does the jury find? The foreman unfolded the paper. We find the defendant guilty. A ripple went through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Richard's face remained impassive, but I saw his lawyer's jaw tighten. On the charge of breach of fiduciary duty? Guilty. On the charge of fraud? Guilty. On the charge of misappropriation of intellectual property? Guilty. For counts. Guilty on all 4. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Priya squeezed my arm, a rare display of emotion from my usually stoic lawyer. Richard stood frozen, his carefully constructed mask finally cracking. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than confidence in his eyes. Fear. Judge Morrison thanked the jury and dismissed them, then turned to Richard. Mr. Vance, you have been found guilty of serious offenses. Sentencing will be scheduled in 60 days. In the meantime, I am granting the plaintiff's request for an injunction. Phoenix Innovations is hereby ordered to cease all operations immediately. All assets derived from the merged company are to be frozen pending the outcome of the sentencing hearing and any subsequent restitution proceedings. Richard's lawyer was on his feet. Your Honor, we intend to appeal. The verdict. You may appeal, Mr. Harrison. That is your right. But the injunction stands. This court will not allow the defendant to continue profiting from assets obtained through fraud while the appeals process plays out. The gavel banged. Court adjourned. Outside the courtroom, the media swarm was overwhelming. Cameras, microphones, shouted questions. Priya guided me through the chaos, repeating no comment until we reached a waiting car. I slumped into the seat, exhausted, elated, and terrified all at once. We won, I whispered. We won, Priya confirmed. But the war isn't over. He'll appeal. He'll drag this out for years if he can. And even if we win the appeal, collecting damages will be another fight. I don't care. We proved he was a fraud. We proved it to the world. She nodded slowly. Yes, we did. The next 60 days were a strange limbo. Richard's lawyers filed appeal after appeal, each one rejected. The media coverage intensified, with business publications dissecting every detail of the case. Former clients reached out, offering support, asking how they could help. Derek, my inside source, quietly left the company and started his own consulting business, using the settlement money I'd advanced him. And then, on the morning of the sentencing hearing, I got a call from Priya. Richard wants to talk. Privately. Before the hearing. I was stunned. Talk about what? A settlement. A deal. He's willing to negotiate. I met him in a neutral location, a law library of all places, recommended by Priya as a space where nothing could be recorded. He looked older than I remembered. Diminished. The confident mentor was gone, replaced by a man facing the end of his career. Alex, he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. I know you have no reason to listen to me. I know I've given you every reason to hate me. But I'm asking you to hear me out. I said nothing, just waited. I was wrong. What I did to you, it wasn't business. It was personal. I let my fear of losing control, of becoming irrelevant, drive me to destroy the one person who actually trusted me. He paused, rubbing his eyes. I've spent the last 60 days thinking about what I've done. About the years of mentorship that were real that I threw away. About the man I could have been if I'd just been honest with you from the start. Richard, what do you want? He took a breath. I want to settle. Not to avoid consequences, I deserve those. But to make things right as much as I can. I'll sign over my stake in the merged company to you. I'll dissolve Phoenix Innovations. I'll pay restitution for every dollar I took. I'll even write a public confession, if that's what you need. I stared at him. And what do you get in return? A chance. Not to escape, I know I won't escape, but to avoid a lengthy prison sentence. To spend my remaining years trying to be a better person, even if it's too late for us. I thought about it for a long moment. The man who'd destroyed me, now begging for mercy. The mentor who'd become a monster, now asking for redemption. I'll need to talk to Priya, I said finally. But Richard, even if I agree, it won't change what you did. It won't bring back the years I lost. I know, he said quietly. I know. Priya was skeptical of the settlement offer. He's trying to manipulate you, Alex. He's always been a master manipulator. This could be another con. Maybe. But if we reject it and he goes to prison, what do we really gain? Vindication? Revenge? I've already gotten those in court. The rest of my life, our lives, will be spent in appeals and legal battles. Is that really what I want? She was quiet for a long moment. What do you want? I thought about it. About the years of trust, the betrayal, the fight. About the empty satisfaction of winning, and the even emptier prospect of endless litigation. I want it to be over, I said. I want to move on. I want to build something new, something that isn't defined by Richard Vance. Priya nodded slowly. Then we negotiate. So what happens in the settlement? Does Richard keep his word? Or is this his final betrayal? And what do I do with the company once it's mine again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The final part is about redemption, closure, and the long road ahead. Subscribe. The settlement negotiations took 3 weeks. Richard's lawyers fought for every concession, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the public pressure was relentless. In the end, he signed away everything. His stake in the merged company, now mine. His rights to Phoenix Innovations dissolved. His personal assets, frozen pending restitution. And a public confession, written in his own hand, published in every major business journal. I watched him sign the final document, his hand shaking slightly, his face a mask of defeat. He looked up at me one last time. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't respond. Sorry wasn't enough. But it was something. The merged company was mine again. But it wasn't the same company I'd built. Richard's years of mismanagement had taken a toll, clients lost, morale destroyed, a culture of fear and suspicion. The first few months were brutal. I spent 12 hours a day rebuilding relationships, restructuring teams, restoring trust. Slowly, painfully, the company began to heal. Derek, my inside source, became my second in command. He'd proven his loyalty, and he had the institutional knowledge I needed. Together, we rebuilt the leadership team, brought back former clients, and launched new products that reminded the world why Nexus had been special in the first place. Richard, meanwhile, faded from view. His public confession had been devastating. A detailed account of his schemes, his lies, his calculated betrayal. The business world, once his stage, closed its doors. He sold his home, moved to a small apartment, lived quietly on whatever assets the courts hadn't seized. I heard he volunteered at a non-profit, teaching business skills to underprivileged youth. I didn't know if that was genuine redemption or just another performance. I didn't care to find out. A year after the settlement, I got a letter, handwritten, on plain paper, from Richard. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it. "Alex, I know you have no reason to read this. I know I have no right to ask for anything. But I'm writing anyway, because there's something I need to say that I couldn't say in the confession. When I started mentoring you all those years ago, it was genuine. I saw myself in you. The hunger, the drive, the willingness to work harder than anyone else. I wanted to help you succeed because it made me feel like my own success meant something. Like I could pass on what I'd learned. Somewhere along the way, that feeling curdled. I started seeing you not as my legacy, but as my competition. I became afraid that your success would eclipse mine, that I'd be forgotten, that everything I'd built would be overshadowed by what you were becoming. So I did the worst thing a mentor can do. I tried to destroy you. There's no excuse for that. No justification. I was weak and selfish and wrong. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that watching you rebuild, watching you take everything I tried to steal and turn it into something even stronger, has been the most painful and most humbling experience of my life. You are the man I should have been. You are the legacy I should have had. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I know, and that I'm sorry. Richard. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer with the other artifacts of that time. The court documents, the news articles, the old photos. I never wrote back. I didn't see the point. But I kept it. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. A reminder that people are complicated, that redemption is possible, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. The years that followed were good. The company thrived. I hired new people, mentored them the way I'd once been mentored, but with transparency, with honesty, with no hidden agenda. I built a culture where trust was the foundation, not the exception. And when I looked at the young entrepreneurs I was helping, I saw myself in them. I saw the hunger, the drive, the willingness to work harder than anyone else. And I made sure they knew that their success would never threaten me, because their success was my success. Derek eventually left to start his own company. We stayed friends. He sent me a photo from his IPO, a framed picture of the two of us at the exchange, grinning like idiots. I hung it in my office right next to the photo of my first office, the one-bedroom apartment where it all began. Richard died 5 years after the settlement. Heart attack, alone in his apartment. I read about it in the newspaper, a small obituary that mentioned his early successes and his later fall from grace. I felt nothing. Not sadness, not satisfaction, just a quiet acknowledgement that a chapter of my life was finally, completely closed. The twist isn't that I won. The twist isn't that Richard lost. The twist is that in the process of fighting him, I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone harder, more strategic, more willing to use the tools of the corporate world to protect what was mine. And then, in the aftermath, I had to learn to be someone else again. Someone who could trust, who could mentor, who could build without looking over his shoulder. The micro-niche here isn't just corporate revenge. It's about the cost of betrayal and the price of rebuilding. It's about learning that winning isn't the same as healing, and that the real victory is in becoming the person you wanted to be, even after someone tried to destroy you. So, did I win? By every external metric, financially, legally, professionally, yes. But the real win was internal. It was learning to trust again, to build again, to mentor without fear. It was becoming the mentor I'd thought Richard was, and then becoming something more, a mentor who'd learned from the worst kind of betrayal and chosen a different path. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? Did you find a way to rebuild? Or are you still carrying the weight of that betrayal? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's talk about trust, about resilience, about the long, hard work of becoming whole again. And if this story of mentorship, betrayal, and hard-won redemption resonated with you, share it. Sometimes, the most important stories are the ones about learning to trust again after someone proves you wrong. Thanks for listening.